All right, so what I want to show for you today is another use of the function nodes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a simple first condition, condition 1, and then hold on to that condition until a secondary condition is met, right? And so this will also kind of get into the theory of BloodHound and how on how multiple solvers need to have, so if you have multiple conditions, right, which require multiple solvers, and now you need to have the outputs of those multiple solvers in alignment, or outputting a signal on the same bar. And this seems to be something that kind of hangs up a lot of people. And how do you get, for example, oh yeah, let me put my indicator on my drawing tool indicator on here. And I still get this question every once in a while, where do I get this toolbar from? So this toolbar shortcut is, I found this on Big Mics. All right, so just do a search on Big Mics and you should find it. I don't know the link to it, so all I can say is just go to Big Mic's download section and do a search for toolbar shortcut, and it will show up. So okay, what I was trying to get to is, say you have, a first condition like this crossover, and then some other kind of condition happens later on, like this pullback, whatever it may be. So how do you link, these two conditions, right? So you can get a crossover solver. It gives you a signal right here. And, the next thing is, how do you get the output from this solver to extend forward until your next condition is met. And getting these two conditions to occur on the same bar is kind of a concept that a lot of people are asking about. And so I just want to show one way of doing that today. So there's usually there's multiple ways to do something in BloodHound. So that so there's no one absolute way. Quite often there's two or more ways that you could kind of build conditions or get conditions to link together. So I guess my point is that the way I'm going to show you today isn't the absolute way. It's not the only way, but it's one possible way. So, all right. Let me get rid of this and we'll get started. All right, as you can see, I already have BloodHound on the chart. So let's open it up and just gonna move everything over. So I like to work like this, where my chart's on one end of my screen. I can just click on it and I have BloodHound on the other end of this screen. So I can just quickly switch back and forth. All right, so first thing I want to do is name my system. And I'm just going to grab a previous name here and put today's date on it. All right, so I'm going to do something simple, and this is pretty close to an actual question I got earlier this week. And so I'm going to use a simple crossover as my first condition. So just as I circled here, so this is my first condition. So, all right, let's put this crossover on here. And it is going to be an SMA 10 over an EMA 55. All right, so let me set this up. I'll put my EMA 55 down in here. And a little shortcut here is if I press the E on my keyboard, it'll jump me all the way down to the E's automatically. There we go. All right, so I've got the 2 periods set in here. And there we go. You can see the chart is marked right there. Nice long signal. And there we go. There's our short signal. All right, and the second condition is going to be pretty simple as well. Basically, I'm just going to look for the first pullback bar, basically the first bar in the opposite direction, which in this case would be this down bar here. All right, so we just had a cross up, and so I'm going to be looking for the first bar pulling back or going down. And there's a couple of ways I can do this. So I'm going to switch over to the logic tab, and let's see. All right, let's give it some kind of a name. Let me put my solver on here. There. All right, so moving on to the secondary condition here. So essentially I'm looking for a bar direction, right? So I want a long signal when I have a down bar. So we do have the bar direction solver, and connect this up, right? Obviously, so when we have up bars, we have a long signal, and whenever there's a down bar, there's a down signal. So we can see on this down bar, we're having a down signal. And so essentially, I just want to reverse this. But you can see also that there's some areas on the chart here where there is no signal. And as you can see, basically, these are doji candles. So the open and the close is at the same price. So there is no direction of that bar, and so there's no signal. And so if I inverted these, it does the job for the most part. We can see this down bar here. And let me stretch this out, make this a little easier to see. So we can see this down bar now has a long signal. So that part is correct. However, on these dojis, you may not want this. You can see on this doji here, I'll just mark one of them. We have a long and a short signal because we inverted it. So you may not want that situation. So the invert may not work in your particular situation. So let me turn the invert off again. And what we'll use is the inverter node. And so this is another question that came in. Someone was trying to flip their strategy signals. And they were trying to use the inverter, but wasn't quite finding the right settings to flip the signals on their strategy. So let me show you how to do that. Connect this up. All right, and you can see there's an option right here to swap the long and short. So let's turn that on. And you can see now that So let's see, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. So you can see it doesn't actually look like it's inverted anything. So if I turn this off, you can see now the signal is inverted, right? Because we have a long signal on this down bar. But if I set this to true, it looks like it put it back to normal. However, if we look back here at these doji bars marked by the circles here, oops, let me get that circle there, the dot. We can see that we have a long and a short, right? So it did actually, it is swapping the long and short, but what's also happening with the inverter node is that the invert parameter is still set to true. So the inverter is kind of double inverting, right? So we are taking the long signals coming in and we're inverting them, and the short signals are being inverted, but also the signals are also being swapped. So that's why it looks like we're getting a short signal on a down bar, because it's being double inverted or double reversed. And that's also why what used to be no signal here on these dojis, there's now a long and a short signal. So what I need to do is I need to turn the invert off on both the long and the short, and now we have the signals reversed. So not inverted, but reversed, right? You can see that now there's still no signal, there's no output from these dojis, but we did get the bar direction reversed. So on this down bar we now have a long signal, and on these two up bars we now have a short signal. So once again, you need to turn the swap long and short to true and turn the inverts off to false. And that will reverse your signals versus inverting. So inverting is a little slightly different. All right, so that's the secondary condition. Right, we have a long signal on a down bar, or a bar in the opposite direction. And so I have a feeling what happens most is people will just take, right, the solver from the first condition, plug it in, and then take the second condition, connect it up, and normally you'll get nothing. However, well, this is a little exception here, because let's connect this up. Yeah, on the actual crossover, we do actually have a long signal, because we just happen to have a down bar on the crossover. So that's why this signal still came through. But where we actually do want a signal, we can see that it's not coming through. And it's not coming through because if we look at the crossover signal, we actually need to have a long signal from the crossover on this down bar. So essentially what we need to do, I'm going to use a triangle here, is we need to extend this long signal forward enough bars so that it lines up where we have our secondary condition on this down bar. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. The simple way, we can use this look back period. Right, I can set this to 10, and we can see it extends that crossover forward 10 bars. So if your rules say that this secondary condition needs to happen within 30 minutes or whatever, if you have a certain fixed amount of time, then using the look back period would work great if you're using minute bars, right? So you can see I'm on 15-minute bars. So setting it to 10 to a 10-bar look back period, that's 150 minutes. All right, so 2.5 hours. So if my rules say that the secondary condition needs to happen within 2.5 hours or 10 bars, this works great. But quite often, rigid rules like that, don't work. And so this lookback period may not be the best for your situation. So let's take a look at another way to do that. So I'll set this back to 1. And another way to do this is to use the toggle node. We'll use the toggle node. So what we'll do is this incoming signal from the crossover will toggle on. It'll toggle this node on, so it'll hold on to this long signal. And then when the secondary signal comes in, we'll use that to turn the toggle node off. So let's connect this up, take a look at it. So we can see here, right, that this is actually kind of rare. Usually you'll just have solid long signals and solid red signals, but it's kind of neat that it showed up this way. So you can see that this crossover signal turned the toggle node on, and it just stays on. Yep, it just stayed on, right? There's no other condition to turn it off. So let me look back on the chart and okay, so we can see here this first cross-up signal. We can see it turned our toggle node on, and I'll copy this, and if I scroll down the chart, we can see this second cross-up toggled the signal off, and that's the default mode for the toggle node, is that it just toggles on and toggles off. So you can see it on the input side, the on signal just toggles. So it's just going to toggle the longs on and off, and same with the shorts. It's just going to toggle the shorts on and off. And that's not quite what we want, because that seems to be more random than anything. It's kind of hard to account. It's kind of hard to take account of how exactly your system's going to function when it's just toggling on and off based on whatever signals are coming in. So we want to apply some control to this toggle node. So let's get back to our original signal here. So the way we want this to work is we actually, on an incoming signal, we want to force the signal on, and essentially now that the signal is forced on, you can see that the long signals and short signals are always on continuously. There's essentially right now there's nothing that toggles the signals off. So now we have to find a way to toggle the signal off. And what we can do is we can use this secondary condition here to toggle the long signal off. Let me slide this back a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll use this reset section here to actually toggle the signal off. And you can see it's already set to force off by default. And this reset section here applies to the signals or the data coming into the reset node here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, link it in here, and look at that. Okay. So now, who can guess what's going on here? Why didn't this work? Well, you're thinking that should probably work right off the bat. And normally it would. But this kind of shows kind of the randomness of the market and how I guess while you're building your system, you really got to look at multiple cases and figure out what's going on to make sure it's working correctly. So let's plug this into the result node so we can take a look. And remember, so right here on the bar that gives us the crossover signal, there's also a long signal because we're on a down bar. So this long signal on the crossover bar also turned the toggle off. So the toggle got turned off on the same bar as the cross up. So what we need to do is make sure that the toggle node doesn't get turned off right away. So we're going to have to create a delay into the reset node. So we want to create a 1 bar delay into it. All right, let's work on doing that. So to build a simple way to build a delay is we'll use the look back. And let's take a look at this look back. All right, so at the look back, its default setting has a displacement of 1. And so that's what this displacement feature is what will shift any signal. It'll shift it forward 1 bar. So back to here. Let's take a look at the original bar direction solver. So you'll remember we had 2 bars here. These 2 doji bars has no signal there and there. So now if we take a look at the look back bar, you see how those no signals got shifted forward by 1 bar, and that is accomplished by this displacement. So if I set this to 0, now there's no displacement, and so these null signals are back on the dojis, right? And just to give another example, if I set this to 2, you guessed it, it shifted these no signals forward 2 bars. So this is how I can shift. I can shift this signal from this down bar forward 1. And all right, so I'm going to connect the toggle node back up, and I'm going to disconnect this into the reset. Take this and shift it in, and ta-da, nothing. All right, let's take a look here. Oh, yeah, force off, and let's see, no action. And all right. Oh, oops, did I not set this right? Oh yeah, okay, there we go. Let me put this back to displacement of 1. And let's see. Okay. So good. You guys get to watch me debug this. So, because this is not happening as planned. Oh, and yeah. So, what's happening is I didn't reverse my signals. I did not reverse the signal. So let me disconnect this. And I'll connect the reversed signals into the look back. All right, there we go. So now I have my long signal, 1 bar, let's see, yeah, 1 bar afterwards, which actually I don't think I want that either. Let's see. Yeah, so we got 1 bar out of the toggle node. We got 1 bar. We got 1 bar with this long signal, but what's happening is, this look back node. Let's take a look at it again. So it has its, let me just mark it here. So its output is delayed by 1 bar, which turns the toggle node off. All right. Yeah. So, yeah. So this look back node turned the toggle node off 1 bar later. All right, which is not what we quite want. Essentially, we want to eliminate. All right. So let me rethink this again. So I'm going to take a look at our inverted signals here. So what I need to do is I need a way to cancel this long signal on the actual crossover bar. That's what I need, is a way to cancel that guy. Well, let's see here. Let's see if the XOR will do it for us. All right. Oops. So what I'm going to do is essentially I'm just going to play around a little bit until I get the results that I want. And bingo. There we go. So you see how there's no signal now on the crossover bar. So that's great. Let me get rid of this AND node there. All right, so that's what we want. And we still have, see on this down bar, this secondary, remember, this is our secondary condition here. I'll mark it with 2 arrows, marking a secondary condition. Actually, all right, so this is our first long condition. And this bar marks our secondary condition. So I'll just mark it with 2 arrows there. There we go. All right, first condition, secondary condition. So great. We eliminated the signal on our crossover first condition. So now this will not reset the toggle node now. All right, all right, so let's try that. So I'm going to disconnect this look back. And we just get this guy out of the way. All right, connect the toggle node back up. Plug the XOR into the reset. And great. Okay, so now you can see. Let's take a look at our crossover signal again. So this is our original crossover signal, right? With only one bar signaling at the crossover. And we need to extend that signal forward, as marked by our triangle here, forward until our secondary condition occurs. So we're close, we're getting closer. So you can see we got 3 bars forward. But what's happening is now we're looking at the XOR node. Remember, the XOR node is providing the data to the reset. And we can see on our secondary condition, we have a long signal, which is turning off the toggle node. So this reset, or this long signal that's going into the reset of the toggle node, is turning the toggle node off. Right, so it's turning the toggle node off on the bar that has our secondary condition. So we need to delay that by 1. So once again, we'll go back to this look back node to help us out. So let's connect that up, and we'll take a look. We'll take a look at it on the result node there. And all right, so we can see our long signal now has been delayed by 1 bar. It's been pushed forward by 1 bar. So it works out good. And hold on a second. I'm going to change the colors here. I want to make this green a little brighter, a little easier to see. So let's see. I'll put it on lime. There we go. That's bright and obvious now. All right. Great. So we can see our long signal here has been pushed forward by 1 bar that will be used to turn the toggle node off. So let's connect this back up, and I'll disconnect the leader from the XOR, and let me kind of squish everything up a little bit. I'll slide this up here and then connect these 2 up, and there. Now we have what we want. So we can see we have long signals that match the rectangle that I drew. So we have a long signal from the crossover extending forward until the secondary condition occurs. That's exactly what we want. Now, so now the next step is, how do we get rid of these 4 long signals so that we only have a long signal on this secondary bar? Right, because we don't want to enter the position right at the crossover. We want to enter long right at this first pullback bar. So how do we do that? Well, if we take a look at our inverter, signal from the inverter, so remember this inverter is providing us the secondary condition, the signal in the secondary condition. So possibly what might happen is we can use an AND node to connect the secondary condition to the crossover condition that we're extending with the toggle node. So let's drop the AND node down, tie this in, connect the AND node up. Time to stretch out the interface here. All right, and we'll take the signal from here, put it into the AND node, and almost. So almost. So it got rid of the two signals in the middle, but we still have a long signal on the crossover because of this down bar. So that didn't quite work. So you probably already guessed. If we take a look at the XOR node, remember the XOR node eliminated the long signal on the actual crossover bar, but we do have our long signal on the first down bar. So let's disconnect the inverter to the AND node. We'll connect the XOR in, and now take a look. And there we go. That's what we wanted. I gotta admit, this has got a little more complex than I planned on it, but I'm actually kind of glad. So this is the kind of stuff that this workshop is all about. Troubleshooting, troubleshooting, situations that might get a little more complex than originally thought, and that's also kind of the nature of the market here, the randomness of it. So this is it. Linking, this crossover, our first condition on this first bar, the crossover, to our secondary condition, which is the first bar in the opposite direction, right? Or in our case, this first down bar. So, yeah, so essentially that was kind of today's lesson. So let's see, let me take a look at the questions here. Let's see if there's any questions on this. So, all right, Greg's asking, do you have to be a paid member for the toolbar? I don't think so. I don't think so, but I do remember Big Mike implemented some kind of requirements a while back because he was tired of like robots downloading all of the stuff on his website. So maybe that is the case. Maybe you do need to be a paid member now to download anything. You didn't used to have to be. So that might be the case now, where you may have to be a paid member to download stuff. I don't remember. All right, so Tony's asking a good question here. How does this differ from using an extender of 10 after this is detected? Yeah, so Tony is bringing up a point here. So what's the difference between this toggle node and using the signal extender? And probably, yeah, not much. There's not much of a difference. So you can see the signal extender also has a reset feature as well, right? So we could use this reset feature to turn the signal extender off. So let's connect this crossover into it. And right now, let's see, the signal extender is set to 5 bars. Right, so that's the default. So the signal extender will take our crossover signal, extend it forward by 5 bars, and then that's it. So that is the difference. The signal extender only lasts for however many bars you specify in here. Right, so I could put 20 bars. And so it's only going to extend for 20 bars, and then it turns off. Whereas the toggle node will stay on until it's reset. So the toggle node will allow however many bars is necessary to go forward until your secondary condition is met. And then the toggle node would get turned off. So that's the difference. The signal extender has a fixed number of bars that it will extend the signal forward to. Whereas the toggle node, it's going to stay on, if you use the force on mode, it'll stay on indefinitely until a secondary condition comes into the reset, and then it gets forced off, at least in this mode. Right, so like I said, there's multiple ways of doing the same thing, and I could use the signal extender. Like I could set my reset after to 500 bars, which I would say 500 bars should definitely be enough time for a secondary condition to occur, right? And then I could use this reset in here. I could take the signal from the XOR node, plug it in. Let me move this forward like this. Plug it in, and just set my resets. Let's see, I need to set up these resets properly. Yeah, so this is set up. So the reset signal, so what I'm using is a signal, a long signal coming into the reset to basically turn the signal extender off. And you'll see it looks like it extended it off. It looks like it turned off 1 bar too soon. And it did, because I'm grabbing it from the XOR where I should be grabbing it from the lookback node. So let me disconnect this, grab the right spot, plug it in there, and there you go. So you can see the signal extender is doing the same thing as the toggle node, right? It's taking the crossover signal from our first condition, extending it forward till our secondary condition, and then it gets turned off. It gets turned off by this reset. Right? So right now, effectively, they're doing the same thing. But technically, the difference is the toggle node will stay on forever until it gets reset, whereas the signal extender will turn off, will only last for 500 bars. So, all right. Let me get to some other questions here. And Dan is asking, why not just compare the two EMAs and then add the bar signal? Yeah, good point, Dan. So the reason why I didn't do that, Dan, is because it wouldn't have demonstrated my it wouldn't have created a good, it wouldn't have demonstrated the conditions I was trying to teach you guys today. So so what Dan is saying is, this is another way to do this is, I'll take a comparison solver that's connected in here, and let me set up my indicators. So I'll put the 10 SMA in there, and down here I'll put the EMA 55. All right, let's put the 55 in there. Okay, so now you can see, so as long as the white line is above the red line, right, the SMA is above the EMA, we have long signals, and then we could, let's see here, use a AND node. Let's connect this AND node in there, connect that in there, and I can take the XOR node let's see. Well, first, let's take the bar direction, inverted bar direction, plug it in here. And we almost get the same thing. But you can see now there's multiple, right? There's multiple signals along here. So then you would have to block these signals. You'd have to use the signal blocker to block these signals. Whereas the toggle node essentially just got turned off. After our first condition, it got turned off. So Dan, there's kind of a subtle difference. You know, I could get the comparison to work. You know, right? I could drop a signal blocker in down here. Let's drop the signal blocker in. Well, first, let's eliminate this first signal right after the crossover. And so I think we need to grab it from this lookback node. Actually, no, from the XOR node, I think. Yeah, there we go, from the XOR node. So we eliminated the first pullback bar, and the second down bar gives us our first long signal. So now we need to essentially eliminate. Oh. All right, close that up. So hopefully you guys saw that. NinjaTrader just released R14. So you may want to do your upgrades this weekend. And also don't forget, today is the contract rollover date. So today you should be using the September futures contracts if you guys are doing futures, right? Okay, so back to eliminating the rest of these signals here. All right, so what we're looking at is the output from this AND node. So we're ANDing the comparison solver to this XOR node, which is which is providing a long signal on this first down bar after the crossover. All right, let me name this. Okay, so now let's take a look at here. Let me move that up. Let's start taking a look at the signal blocker, and we'll put in, I don't know, hopefully 200 bars ought to be enough. And all right, and I need to take a look at my resets, and so I'm going to turn them all off to start with. And now we can see, oh, there's no signal here. And here's a neat little tip for troubleshooting the signal blocker. You can see this setting down here, this output says blocked output. And it's set to 0. If I set this blocked output to 0.1, then now when you look on this, it looks like I have signals on the long and short. But if you look at the value is 0.10. So it's not actually a signal. That's why you're not getting the racing stripes on your chart, because the output is 0.10, but it's because of the scaling. So you might want to set BloodHound to a fixed scaling. So let's here, let me just grab a signal, and I'll use there. So there we go. Okay, so now I set this to a fixed scaling. So now let's take a look at this signal blocker again. There we go. So now you can see I have a tenth of an output. So I can see when the signal blocker is blocking a signal. So now I can scroll back on my chart and look for when the signal blocker was first activated. And yep, here it is. So yep. So we had a short signal coming in. Was that? Yeah, it was a short signal was coming in to the signal blocker, and it started blocking for another 200 bars. Right. So you can see right here on this one bar, there's no output. So you can see that it stopped blocking. So this bar right here was the 200th bar, and this was the 201 bar where no signal was being blocked, but then another signal came in and it started blocking again. So that's why, when we go back to our original spot here, so the signal blocker is still blocking for 200 bars. So we need to use a reset to get this thing reset correctly. And I'm thinking, let's see, I'm thinking I'll use this crossover to reset it. And so I'm taking the crossover, connecting it into the reset. So what I'm looking for are this reset signal. I'm going to set this to true, and there we go. So let me explain the logic here, what just happened. So remember, this arrow here marks the crossover, and we can see right after the crossover, the signal stopped being blocked. So the long signal that's coming from this crossover turned the signal blocker off. Right? You can see on the next bar here, it turned the signal blocker off, which then allowed for this for our secondary signal to actually fire. And now we can see it eliminated all the rest of these long signals along here. And we don't have a cross down to take a look at it, at the signal blocker getting reset again. So let's look back in the back of the chart here. Yeah, here we go. So here's another situation. We have a crossover right there. So that's condition 1. And this is condition 2. And if you look on our output, you can see there's one bar here that's not blocking the long signals. And that allowed this signal to come through on our secondary condition. And now it's blocking the rest, right? We can see there's an output, a long output, so it's blocking the rest. And let's scroll forward. And so right here on our cross down, so this is our cross down signal. Oh, let me make that visible for you. And actually, let me make sure I marked the right bar. Oh, yeah. I marked it one bar too soon. Let me slide this over. There we go. All right, so we can see this bar has the crossover signal that I marked with the white line. And if we look down here at our outputs, we can see the bar after, the short signals were no longer being blocked. So the short signals got reset by the cross down signal, and it's not being blocked until I need to adjust my scaling again. There. And now you can, so we have the signal blocker got turned off and allowed this first short signal to come through, and then the signal blocker is blocking short signals once again. And we can still see that the long signals are still being blocked. And they're still being blocked until we get our next cross up. And so that long signal crossing up turned the signal blocker off, which then allowed for our secondary condition to occur here. Okay, so, all right, I hope that answers your question, Dan. I went a little beyond, but that was another good question. Oh. All right. All right. Okay, yeah, so Tony is confirming that Big Mike now wants money to get into the download section. Yeah, I think he did that to eliminate robots from downloading all of his indicators. Even though they're free indicators, people posted them up for free to the general public. He doesn't want everybody to get them. All right, so let's see. Okay, I'm just trying to get through some comments here to some questions. So Tony's saying that it's going to go up. The price is supposed to go up at the end of this month. So, and I'd say it's worth the money. It's a one-time donation, and I think it's worth the money. So I paid once, long time ago, to get elite membership access, and it's been well worth its money. Yeah, so Greg's also confirming that you now have to be a paid member to get to the download section. All right. Oh, Tony's saying that the toolbar is also available on Ninja's forum. So that's right. I don't go to Ninja's download section all that often, so I sometimes forget about it. But that's right. NinjaTrader has a download section on their forum, and the toolbar is up there supposedly. So take a look there for it. All right, Robert. Robert's got a good comment here. Seeing you struggle makes me realize I am not as bad at this as I was beginning to think. So, yeah, Robert, I mean, don't ever expect yourself to have this all figured out in your head. There's no way. You know, that's why coding this stuff takes so long, because you do have to be a programmer, you do have to have this all conceived of in your mind before you can code it. Whereas with, BloodHound, with these little, leaders connecting, you can just experiment and play around until you get the results you want, even though you don't quite comprehend what you're doing. But also getting this visual feedback of being able to say, oh, well, what did this XOR node give me? It tells you instantly, so you don't have to figure this out in your head ahead of time. I know that I don't have this all figured out in my head. Sometimes I can, but quite often I don't. And so a lot of times I'll just kind of play around. You know, it's like I knew that when I first thought of this XOR no, I was like, yeah, I think that's going to work for me. I didn't know for sure if it was going to work for me, and I didn't want to figure it out in my head. I figured I might as well just put it on the logic board, test it out, see if it works in front of you guys. You know, I could have tried to figure it out in my head first, but you guys would have had to have waited for me to do that. So, you know, don't worry about trying to have this all figured out in advance. Just play with it. Just play around. And I think you'll find that it'll reduce your learning curve significantly if you just kind of play around and experiment with stuff. All right, so let me read through some more of these comments here. So Tony's asking, back on the question, how was it different from using a look back 10 versus using extender for 10? Yeah, that's a tricky question. So when you look at a look back signal versus an extender signal, they can kind of look the same. So let's take a look here. Here. All right, I'm going to disconnect this there. All right, set this down to something reasonable, like 10. All right, I'm going to turn all the resets off. So now we're essentially the signal extender is extended for 10 bars, and that's it, that flat. And what Tony is saying that this look back node can give you the same look. Let's connect this in, and let me set the displacement to 0. All right, so our signal from our crossover is now on the original crossover bar instead of being displaced by 1. So now if we set our look back to 10, now notice, right, it's set to 1. There's no parameter, oh, excuse me, got the hiccups. There's no parameter down here. I'm going to set this to 10, and now you see this new parameter becomes visible, and you'll see it set to average. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to maximum. So if I set it to maximum, right, it looks exactly like the signal extender. And if you want to know what all these different things do, I demonstrated all the function nodes back in the end of January and the beginning of February. So if you look in our recorded webinar or recorded workshop section, go back to January and the beginning of February, and you'll see the explanation of all of these function nodes. So anyways, back to the original question, right? It looks the same. So the big exception is only the signal extender has all of these reset options. So you can use these resets to kill this 10-bar extension early. So that's the difference, right? This look back doesn't have any way to shorten the look back. It's fixed at 10. It's going to stay at 10, and you can't shorten it. So the signal extender, you can use all these resets to kind of shorten this 10-bar extension, right? So all right, so back to the questions here. Let me read through some of these. Okay, so Tony's wanting to kind of expand upon this example I gave here. So Tony, I'll get back to them and read through some of these others and see if there's any other short questions here. Okay. All right. All right. Yeah. Bob and I guess, have been around for quite a while. Bob just made the comment he paid $20 way back in the beginning when Big Mike's kind of opened up. So did I, Bob. I got in on that deal too. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to get to Tony's second question first. So Tony is asking, basically, say like you have, a system like this all set up, and you want a way to copy this into, let's say you already have another logic board that you've been working on, right? Whatever. Right, so you already have this other logic that you've been working on, and so if you're really building into a complex situation, or you're experimenting with different ideas, you may want a way to copy a piece of logic, where you've managed to figure out something, and you want to implement a piece of it. Say I only want to implement these solvers here, a piece of this into another existing logic template. And right now we don't have a way to copy nodes back and forth. That will kind of like be our next big interface revamp. So we have a bigger task that we're working on before we get to that. So hopefully later, by the end of this year, we'll be able to get that copy button, and we'll also revamp the interface a little bit. So right now there is no way to just simply copy stuff like that. But kind of a workaround, you'll have to make a decision as to what's going to be quicker and easier for you. The really only workaround is you could take this logic and just copy the whole logic. Right, so I just made a copy of it. You can copy it. I'll just name it number 2. So I have, the original, and then I have the copy of it number 2. And so if there's more nodes in what you want to copy, then just copy the whole template, and take the nodes from your other logic board, which in this case is just 1, and I could just drop this 1 node into this copy. So if I can just go through and get rid of what I don't want. And just get rid of what I don't want and say I only wanted these components. And then just drop that 1 solver, or however many solvers you have in this other logic template. Just drop them into this copy, and you'll just have to kind of link them together. So those are kind of the 2 ways of copying logic around that we have right now. So all right. Okay, so I'm going to get back to, let's see, let me get back to this original logic template. All right, so I think I'm going to use this output from this AND node. And let me read through Tony's question here. All right, so he says, I also have a practical question on this example. When the candle price comes back down and we trigger the signal, however, I really want to know if the price comes back with if the price coming back will be enough of a pullback. So I want to compare the closing price with the previous candle's opening price. Could you elaborate on this a bit? Sure. All right. So Tony wants to compare the, let's see, I'll use this diamond, the closing price here to the opening price of the previous candle back. And I guess essentially he wants to make sure that the closing price, in this case we'll just say let's make sure the closing price is below the open, at least below the open. So let's set up a comparison solver here to do this. So I'm going to take the closing price. I'm going to take a shortcut here, just use the closing price from the type section here and compare it to the open of the previous bar. So to get the opening price, I'm going to use SI Chameleon. And so there we go. So I'll grab the opening price. And I want to get the opening price of 1 bar back. So I need to use a displacement of 1. And let's take a look at what we have here. So since our closing price is below our opening price, we have a short signal. But in our situation, we want to take a long, so I need to essentially reverse the output here. And normally, I would say normally I would think that I could just use the invert, but I can see that may not work because I have a bar here with no signal. So I would actually get a signal if I inverted it. So I don't want to use the inverter. I just want to reverse it. So let's go back and let's grab an inverter. Well, actually, I don't need to grab an inverter. Let's use the outputs to do this the correct way. So I'm going to turn my outputs off. All right, so no outputs. And I'm going to use the long output when A is less than B. So remember, A is our closing price, right, in this indicator A section. And indicator B section is our opening price. So here, when we have A, the closing price, is less than B, the opening price, I want a long output, right? Because the closing price right here is less than the opening price. And I want a long output. And there we go. So that's working. That's what we want. And I want the opposite for the shorts. So let me put the opposites in there. All right, there we go. So now we have our comparison solver met. And now, let's see where, I think this and node I think is what I want to use. Great, yep. So that gives us a nice clean signal there. So all I need to do is, since I have an AND node already, I would just connect this up to this AND node, and voila. Now, if, say you want the closing price to be a certain amount, below the opening price, or well, actually, let's make sure that the opening price or the closing price is below the low of the previous bar. All right, so I can open this back up. I'll use the low of the previous bar, and now there's no signal. Right, so if I take a look at the comparison signal, we can see we actually did not get along here. That's because the close is not less than the low. So that worked out right. Let's put this back to the open. And so here, there we go. So there's our long signal now. Let's connect this back up. We have our signal back. So what I can start doing is I can start adjusting this long amount to make sure I have a certain number of ticks. Let's see if 5 ticks. So what I'm doing is if I put 5 ticks in here, I want to make sure that the closing price is more than 5 ticks lower than the opening price here. And we still have a signal, so it still is. Let's check to see if 10 ticks. Yep, so our closing price is more than 10 ticks below the open. Let's try 15 ticks. And it's not quite 15 ticks. So we can see we still have an output here. Let's take a look at this output and see what it is. So the output is 0.66 or 0.67 to round it up. So what that's saying is that the closing price is almost 15 ticks less, but not quite. So that's how you can specify like a certain number of, excuse me, I'm losing my voice again, a certain number of ticks between the closing price and the open. You know, it's very dry up here, and oh man, I have lost my voice. Really dry up here in Idaho. And so when I talk for a long time like this, it just dries out my throat. Yeah, the humidity up here, at least in the lower part of Idaho, it's desert, and the humidity is super low, and it really dries stuff out quickly. You had to drink a lot of water up here. Okay, so and another, probably a more practical way of making sure that your closing price is below your opening price by a certain amount, probably something more practical, is to use the ATR. Right, so let's see, let's try something like an ATR 0.5 and ATR of 100 bars. Here, how about if I shorten this up to like the last, I don't know, 25 bars. Just so I'm looking at some more recent volatility instead of 100 bars. And let's see, yeah, we still have a signal. So that's saying that the closing price was more than half an ATR below. Let's see if we go to 1 ATR. See what happens. And it's not quite 1 ATR. Let's see. Yeah, so our output here is 0.55. So I'm looking at the comparison solver now, which the comparison solver is telling me if the price difference from the close to the open is 1 ATR or not. Right, you can see that the output of this comparison solver is 0.55. So essentially what that's telling me is that the difference between the closing price and open is approximately half an ATR. For those of you who understand what the ATR is doing, that's what it's saying. All right, so I think I took care of that question for you, Tony. That was a good question. Let's see. All right, looks like Robert has a question here. At the end of last week's training, Brett asked if the better momentum third-party indicator would work in BloodHound. I am able to make better momentum work using Ninja Wizard, but not BloodHound. Okay. If an indicator works in the Wizard, should it also work in BloodHound? And yes, it should. I'm not sure why it wouldn't. A better momentum. Let's see. Robert or Brett, if you don't mind, could you show me where you got the better momentum? It may not be working in BloodHound if it has multiple plots. If it has multiple plots, like to take advantage of changing the colors of the plots, that could be one reason why it's not working right in BloodHound. Because a lot of guys will create, they'll take an indicator and break it into multiple plot colors. And let's see, I don't think I have an example to show you. Oh, maybe I do. Well, actually, no. Let's see, the better. Now, the BB MACD is not a good example. Oh, here we go. Yeah, the ADX VMA. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, I don't have the other shoot. One of the ADX VMAs breaks its plot up into 3 different plots because it uses 3 different colors, and that's kind of a good example of some of the issues that can cause in BloodHound because it's using multiple plots. Well, I don't think I have an example, a good example to show you of what I'm talking about. So if, all right, okay, good. So Robert's going to email that to me, and I'll take a look at that. And I guess that'll make a good kind of discussion for next week's workshop, dealing with these indicators that have multiple plots and what the issue is, and maybe some workarounds, hopefully. So, all right, good. I'll look for that, Robert. All right, so I'm just kind of reading through some comments. And let's see. Oh, okay. So Gerard has a good question here. So Zach, on the comparison solver, when would you use the small amount versus the large amount? So that's a good question. So I do believe that if you look at the workshop video on the comparison solver, I did address that. But let me just go over that one specific detail here. All right, let's get back to the logic board. All right, so I'll connect the comparison solver up here. And let me put this back on ticks because ticks is a little easier to visualize. Okay, so when would you want to use the small amount versus when would you want to use the large amount? So you can see in the output sections here, right, there's 5 different parameters here. So the large amount here applies to the outer parameters. See these 2 outer parameters that says by 1 tick or more? So you can see in the large amount, I have set 1 tick. So let me make this blazingly obvious. I'll go 5 ticks. And you'll see the name of the parameter didn't update, so sometimes you just got to click off and click back on to get this to update. And so now you can see it says these 2 parameters here say by 5 ticks or more, right? So the large amount applies to these outer parameters, whereas the small amount applies to these 2 inner parameters, right? You can see this still says by 1 tick, right? This says by 0 tick. It says by 0 ticks, by 0 ticks. And the small amount you can see is set to 0 ticks. So if I change that to 1, and I'll need to click off again. Now you can see this says by 1 tick, and the outer one, or the upper one, says by 5 ticks. So if you want to, if you need to use any of the output parameters with the inner ones, you would use the small amount for that. So if you needed to use this neutral, which neutral is kind of, it's not equals, but you could use this neutral to say, are these 2 equal to each other by this small amount? So right now, with this equal to 1 tick, here, let me actually set the output up to show you this. So I'm going to put 1 in there, and let's turn that off. I'll set both the short and the long to 1 tick, and let's see if I can find a spot. Yeah, perfect. Here we go. So let me change my scaling so you can see this. And let me change so it's set to 10 ticks. All right, let me set this down to 2 ticks. Oh, whoops, hold on. Wrong one. Okay, I'm going to put this back to 10 ticks. And I need to change the chart properties and where to go? Yeah, I think that was correct, wasn't it? Yeah, sorry about that. I did have it correct the first time. All right, so the horizontal grid lines are spaced every 2 ticks now. So we can see that we have our small amount set to 1 tick. And so we're looking, so this neutral is looking for A to essentially be approximately or equal, A equal to B within 1 tick, or whatever this small amount is. And so we can see the closing price here. I'll mark the closing price with this diamond is within 1 tick of this bar's opening price. And therefore we got an output here. So this neutral is kind of a way of saying you want something equal, or you want something within the proximity of whatever your small amount. So if I set this to 2, then we're looking for the closing price and the opening price to be within 2 ticks of each other. And let's see if there's any more signals. Yeah, here we go. And so let's see. Yep. So I have the closing price right there, and the opening price right there, and they're within 2 ticks of each other. See if there's any other spots. Well, anyways, I think you guys get the point. So that's kind of what this, so you would use the small amount to kind of use the neutral area, or this A, greater than B by 1 ticks. So the small amount applies to the inner 3 parameters, whereas the large amount applies to the outer parameters. So, all right, good question there, Gerard. So Tony's asking, is better momentum an indicator to download? Yes, it is, but I don't know where. Robert's going to get that to me. So I'll probably use this better momentum indicator, since a couple of customers have been having trouble with it. I'll probably use this in next week's workshop, and I'll show you guys where to get it. All right, well, with that, guys, I'm going to wrap this up, and it's good seeing you guys again, and have a good weekend as usual, and we'll see you next week, hopefully. All right, bye-bye, guys.